Hey YouTube, just got my brand new iPhone 12 mini and it seems to be having some issues with the touch screen. I noticed a lot of users on Reddit are experiencing the same thing, so I thought I'd make a video and see if we could get to the bottom of this, or at least identify a couple patterns by taking a closer look. So right now I have my iPhone 12 mini. This is the blue model, not that it would make much of a difference. Sitting on a plastic surface, a non-conductive surface, and well, that's important because this is a capacitive touchscreen. So it's actually registering the electrical signature of your finger, and on that non-conductive surface you can see that the screen works from time to time, but right now I'm pressing fairly substantially on the camera button and it wasn't registering my touch at all. The screen just went to sleep. But when I tap on the screen, it does register the touch fairly generally. It knows that I'm there. It wakes the screen for me. And if I swipe up from the bottom, the buttons, the numeric pad tends to work, but you can see right there we're having some issues there. And the issues are persistent across all the buttons, across all the regions of the screen. I find this most annoying with these buttons along the bottom, or swiping up to unlock. You can see sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's fairly intermittent. But this particular iPhone 12 is in an Apple branded MagSafe case. This is the leather case. And we'll try taking it off and we'll see if that makes any difference. I'm using a Belkin screen protector right now, and that should not cause the issues that we're seeing because it is a capacitive touchscreen. So it can sense the electrical the electrical signature of my finger through a thin layer of glass like that Belkin screen protector. That shouldn't be any issue. That shouldn't interfere whatsoever. If I can get it out, the Apple cases are very good at holding on. But one thing that you notice that's different about these cases, these are MagSafe cases. So they have a magnet in them now that was not there before. Is it possible that the magnet's interfering? Maybe with the charging coils on the back of the phone? I'm not sure. A lot of people are theorizing that it's a ground issue. So the first thing that we'll do is take the MagSafe case away and set that off to the side. And let's see if our touchscreen has gotten any better. You can see that the camera just worked there. But it's still intermittent. I would say that this is exactly the same. So that doesn't seem to have made a difference. Now, it's sitting on a non-conductive surface, right? The only electrical interface that we have with the phone is my finger on the touchscreen. So if I pick the phone up and hold it in my hand by the metal frame, what we've done is we've electrically connected the floating ground in the phone to the ground of my body. So they're the same. And you can see the screen now behaves a lot more like I would expect. I missed the flashlight button over there. It's just a little bit too big for one-handed operation still, but 2, 3, right? It behaves just like you would expect an iPhone touchscreen to behave. So it seems to be a grounding issue, or an issue with the way that the phone software is interfacing with the floating ground on this device. So let's go ahead and put it back into its case now. I don't think it's related to the new MagSafe system at all. Appears to be working fine for a few seconds, and then we see the issue manifest itself again. There we go. Now, again, I'm pressing pretty substantially here. It's very deliberate, forceful presses. You can see the issues manifested itself. So one thing that the Apple cases feature, the sleep wake button and the volume buttons are actually metallic. So these are conductive surfaces that are touching the frame on the other side. So if we put our hand on those buttons, again, our hand is electrically linked, electrically connected to the phone's frame, and we see the issue go away. So I know this has been really frustrating for some users, but based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like a software issue. We're running iOS 14.2, which is the latest as of filming on November 15th. So I strongly suspect that Apple would be able to solve this issue with a software update and not have to RMA devices and actually replace hardware. So that's one bit of good news, even though this is very frustrating. Here's the issue again, and we touch those metallic buttons, and it's gone. So it's definitely an electrical grounding issue, and probably the way that the software is interfacing with the floating ground on the phone. So let me show you the floating ground using this old Tektronix oscilloscope. This is the ground on the iPhone 12. There we go. It's very dirty. You can see, there's a lot of components inside the phone that are operating at high frequencies and producing electronic noise. So that electronic noise is reflected in this ground. Now, if we touch the phone, if we touch the chassis of the phone and actually connect it to a ground, you can see that that becomes a lot cleaner of a signal. Okay, welcome to my filthy, dirty whiteboard. Why do clean electrical signals matter when it comes to the capacitive touchscreen on an iPhone? Okay, well, what's a capacitive touchscreen? There's a couple different ways to accomplish capacitive touchscreens, but I think Apple's doing something like this. Typically, you'll have one of the layers in the display. We'll have a grid of conductors laid across it. Too small for the eye to see, but they're there, and they're connected to capacitors. So a capacitor, you can just think of a capacitor like a battery. And like a battery, based on its capacitance or capacity, it'll take a fixed amount of time to charge or discharge. So it'll charge up just like that, and then it'll discharge just like a battery would, time t. So if you have a battery of a certain capacity, it'll take X amount of time for the battery to charge up, as long as you're feeding it a fixed amount of power, right? A capacitor is no different. And I think that's how Apple's accomplishing their touch input on their phones. That's how an iPhone knows that you're touching it. They're constantly charging and discharging these capacitors in the capacitive touchscreen, and they're measuring the amount of time that it takes for them to charge or discharge. So as long as that capacity is fixed, the iPhone will receive time t. That's what it's expecting to get. Nothing anomalous. The iPhone just continues on as normal. So the trick to a capacitive touchscreen is to realize that your body, even though mine is dirty with whiteboard marker, your body has a capacitance to it. So when you touch the screen, you're actually adding capacitance to that particular circuit. And if you add capacitance, or we have the analogy of a battery, if you add capacity to a battery, what happens? It's going to take longer to charge or discharge. So you're adding time to it. So when the iPhone sees that time to charge or discharge the capacitors increase on a certain capacitor circuit, it knows if that increases by some amount that they have in their algorithm, it knows, hey, I've been touched. Ooh, that's terrible. just ignore that horrible art. So that's how a capacitive touchscreen should work. Why might it not? If you have that capacitor, right, and then you add a capacitance to it, your time increases. We've already talked about that. So this is kind of the circuit diagram of the same thing that we were talking about. It's a fixed time to charge or discharge a capacitor when the capacitance is fixed and when the voltage across that capacitor is fixed. When the voltage is not fixed, when you don't control that variable, you might get some unexpected outputs, or in this case, most likely an output that's confusing the algorithm. So we have our capacitor that's part of the touchscreen behaving as normally, and then we touch it and we add the second capacitor, which is our body, into the circuit, but those two grounds are not necessarily the same. So you have body ground and phone ground, and they're not necessarily equal. They fluctuate. We've seen how dirty the ground on the phone was when it was just that floating ground. When you're not touching it, when you're not clamping the ground voltage to be equal with your body ground by electrically connecting the two, you can get these weird floats. So the voltage across C2, the phone has no way of knowing what it is because it's varying widely, and it has no reference to that voltage. So therefore the phone might get an unexpected T value for this increase. So what does that mean? Maybe the time isn't increasing by quite enough to reach that touch threshold, so it doesn't register it, or maybe it's even decreasing. If you have like a 0 value for your voltage across the capacitor, say that your body has a positive charge to it, or there's just not enough differential voltage between the VN that's feeding this capacitive touchscreen and the phone's ground. So Apple could either increase the margin of error in their algorithm for that extended T value, not demand it to increase quite so far, kind of detect any increase, or maybe they need to drive a larger voltage across that capacitive touchscreen. In any case, it's most likely a software update, which is definitely good for iPhone 12 owners like myself. So the last thing that I did is I ran a test of 100 attempts to touch the camera button and launch the camera from the lock screen. So you see, when the phone was sitting on the table, just totally electrically isolated, except for my finger on the screen, it only registered the touch 10 times out of 100 trials. So clearly, there's a major issue with the grounding on the iPhone 12 minis, and we've seen the same issue when it was in its case. Those values were within margin of error, so I don't think that MagSafe really has any impact here whatsoever. But when we were holding it in our hand, I held it in the case with my fingers touching those metallic buttons, so we were making some contact with the phone's chassis and therefore electrically connecting ourselves to phone ground, but I don't think we had quite as good of a connection as we did when we were holding the chassis of the phone directly, because you only see an 80% accuracy. When we took the phone out of the case, we've seen 100% proper and expected function of the touchscreen. So in the short term, that seems to be your solution. We'll take our phones out of our cases for now and wait for iOS 14.2.1, because based on what I'm seeing here, there's no reason that Apple can't fix this with a simple patch. So we'll eagerly await that in the coming days here. But most likely, I think this is the issue that we're seeing. This is what we're dealing with. So let me know in the comments if you are seeing the same thing, if you are experiencing this touch disease on iPhone 12, and if so, are you using a case? What kind of case? If you're using a case and you're not noticing any issues, maybe some of the other new buyers like myself would be interested to know just what cases there are that don't cause this issue. I know at least the Apple leather MagSafe cases seem to do so. That's the only case that I have. I just got the phone yesterday. But I thought I'd make this video because I was curious as to what could be causing it. So I hope that you found it informative and interesting.
So if you did, hey, hit that thumbs up button and tell me in the comments what you think. You're gonna send it back to Apple or trade in for a phone that's not experiencing the issue like the 12 Pros, or are you going to stick it out and wait for a software patch like I am?